And just to explain, when we met,
Last week.
well, it's been 3 weeks now that the police department, the street department, administration, and myself met in planning for the opening of the market. And it was recommended at that time by the street department and the police department to not have the roundabout that the turnaround area that we put on 5th next to Main that we did last year, because it wasn't very effective, and we had some problems with people driving in and not being able to turn around and drive out. So they recommended, for safety purposes, that we close 5th Street at the alley, and that created an opportunity for spacing that hadn't been there before. And we thought it would be better to put vendors in that spacing than to leave it with no parking and nobody there. We discussed this with the co-op and the storm cellar and also the Pritchard, and they were in favor of this because they thought it was another gateway and another entrance into the market. So staff made the decision to fill the space with booths, vendor booths.
Okay. Thank you, Kathleen. Dan?
Yep.
And I think when we brought this to, you brought this to committee last week as part of another report, but
Yep.
is our plan then to fill 5th Street before we continue down Main Street to
No,
6th, or?
we're still going down Main Street to 6th. We have several large vendors that aren't here yet. So, and we're picking up more vendors every week. So I think it'll only be about a month and we'll be completely full.
And then I noticed that there's crosshatched area and clear area within the border. I'm assuming that the clear area is so folks walking their dogs can pass through, where the crosshatched area is where the dogs aren't permitted, or
Correct.
pets.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Tom?
Following up on Dan's question, I think what I at least was wondering last week was if we, so early in the season before those big vendors come, we will not have the farmers market go down Main Street past 5th Street. Is that correct? Or
Well, we already have some seasoned
starting
vendors.
to go down there?
Yeah.
now? Okay.
They're
So-
already, there's probably 8 vendors in there already that are seasoned vendors that are here.
And are they packed up against 5th Street, and then we'll just slowly push to the south? Is that
There's 2 big truck farmers that haven't come in yet that are on the Kenworthy side in front of the storm cellar. And ton makers are not here yet in front of the Pritchard. Neither is Mr. Hagan in front of the Pritchard.
Okay.
And so even between 3rd and 5th,
It's still light.
yep.
Okay. And if I may have a couple more. So
Yep.
another question that I have is, last year we had wheelchair accessible parking between the alley and Main Street, right by the Pritchard. Do you remember last year we had some temporary handicap or wheelchair accessible parking spaces right by the Pritchard that were just
Those were parking spaces that were blocked to accommodate the turnaround. But we put the handicap up by the Moscow Hotel.
But I thought I remembered
And we
seeing-
also tried to do some handicap on 4th Street near the turnaround, near the
Okay.
police department. But that was decided that the police wanted that all open for turnaround, so we haven't signed handicap in there.
Are we thinking that we might put it on, I guess the question I'm asking is,
Yeah.
would we then consider putting it on 5th Street to the east of the alley? I'm thinking that it's a fairly central location, and it might be helpful for people that have expressed the difficulty in walking up and down the linear nature of the farmers market, that we try to, reserve some parking or make some parking easily accessible for people that are having that difficulty in walking. And perhaps what we do is put some wheelchair accessible parking spaces on a temporary basis close to that area, and then maybe talk to Gritman or somebody about donating some wheelchairs and having them available so people can just show up and use them if they need them. It's a thought, and I just didn't know
Yeah.
if you'd been thinking about it. But perhaps that can be discussed at the
Sounds like
advisory commission thing. So you can, no, forget
Well,
my,
and
my
we
question.
Sounds like a job for the commission, yes.
Okay. The other thing that is the 4th Street turnaround area there behind the fountain works really good for
Okay.
people unloading, people picking up fruit, picking up baskets. It works really good there to have the turnaround, and so that might be another option.
If somebody's being unloaded, but I guess what I'm talking about is the person that drives down there and then
Right.
gets in their wheelchair and goes. Okay.
Right.
So then my last question is about the dog issue.
Yep.
And I think this doesn't highlight the dog area or the dog walking on the
It does,
sidewalk
actually.
issue? Oh, it does?
Everything that isn't crosshatched, dogs are allowed.
Okay. So that would be I'm sorry, so I didn't see that legend, I guess. But, so it'd be the non-crossed out area up the east side of Main Street, all the way from 3rd down to 6th, and then the south side of 5th Street from the alley to Main Street.
Yeah.
And it would include the crosswalk across 5th Street. Okay. I don't know if everybody can see the non-crosshatched area past maybe this middle part of the room. But anyway, that's, okay, I'm just going to stop asking questions.
Okay, Gary, do you have
If I
something to
may.
add, please?
And I apologize, when this came to committee, we had not realized at that time that the map needed to be amended. It does in fact need to be amended. It's part of the second amended farmers market policies that were passed by the council last August 20th. So this is actually an appendix to those policies. So, and Tom, the original policies do have that legend on there.
Okay,
So
that's
as
why.
it's attached, that will be
It's at the
added.
bottom of this slide. You just can't see it.
Okay.
Thanks. This is probably in our packet.
And Gary, do you know the answer to,
Yep.
Tom was talking
Got it.
about
Thank you.
the possibility of having displaced handicap parking on 4th Street, that there was some discussion that it would be accommodated, but the police needed it for turnaround. Did we actually displace farmers market parking for people with disabilities?
Actually, no. If I recall, there are more handicap spaces than are necessary. The streets department sets up temporary handicap spaces that they're not real comfortable with because under the code, it needs to be permanent signage, but people seem to be respectful of those designations. 4th Street's problematic because the police do need access to turn around. It was discussed in the conversation that we had with all of the folks on the 5th Street right-of-way, whether or not that could be utilized again as a turnaround, which was very uncomfortable. The police didn't like that because there wasn't a physical barrier between the farmers market and people who would go up 5th Street westbound and then all of a sudden couldn't turn around or didn't know what to do. Also, we had some vendors who were utilizing it as permanent parking for loading, unloading, and as far as handicap parking was discussed, but again, it was problematic because there was no place to turn around. So the areas that they've got their permanent handicap parking and the temporary, mostly to the west of Friendship Square, isn't that correct, Kathleen, on 4th Street, has worked out fairly well. It's a flat way to get around. But I think Tom's right, that we could possibly put some on the east side, might make it better as well. So we
East
can
side
look
of the
into that.
alleyway on there?
You bet.
Oh, good conversation with that commission.
Especially if
Walter,
they
I
had a
saw your
dog.
hand. Yeah, Walter, your hand was up. a minute ago.
Several things. Tom, to answer your comment earlier, the couple of times I've been down to the market this year, it appeared to me very obvious that the market would extend down Main Street to 6th just as soon as they had enough vendors to fill it up. In other words, it was barricaded off, it was open, it was available. It was pointed out to me by the market manager this past Saturday that if those vendors who are on 5th between Main and the alley had not been there but had been in Main Street, it would have virtually filled up Main Street. So we've created more vendor spaces in doing this. I think it's a good idea. I think staff just went with a good idea as a good idea without realizing that there needed to be a map adjustment to catch up with it. Regarding the handicap parking, I'm a little puzzled, Kathleen and Gary, about the statement that the police department didn't want handicap parking on 4th because of the turnaround. There's parking on 4th west of the alley every day of the week. It's striped, and the police have access to the turnaround, as does any traffic that gets into 4th Street. I guess I'm not sure why creating or making those diagonal places between the alley on 4th and the fountain handicap at market times creates any greater problem for turnaround than regular car parking. So that might be something that I would suggest that it be relooked at.
If I may.
Please.
I can't answer specifically, except that because of the proximity of booths and vendors to that area, the alleys were being blocked. People were unloading, which is what alleys are for, but if that area, and I understand what you're saying, that there is parking in there around the clock anyway, well, except for the 3 to 7 or 3 to 6, whatever it is, I can't remember, that there could be handicap designated parking. I can't answer why that was not favored by the police. But again, we can find that out.
May just take a look at it. And then the last thing I've got, if I may, Madam
Please.
Mayor.
Oh, please.
I was initially concerned about the sidewalk on the east side of Main, which we had designated as a dog access area or a walk your dog area while keeping them out of the market, now goes through the middle of the market effectively in the crosswalk on Main Street across Fifth Street. In talking to several people, I'm more comfortable with that, as long as people don't use that as a place to stop, congregate, and they've got effectively have dogs now in the middle of the market. So I would encourage market staff and the PD to, pay attention. There was a report by someone to the police department Saturday that there were 13 dogs in the market. A police officer came down, I think found a couple, and the market manager had already talked to a couple of people. It's primarily, or if not totally, people that just are not aware of the policy and don't either see or pay attention to the no animal sign. So it continues to need attention, and I think that what you're proposing here is okay as long as we are aware that it's a way for people to move up and down the market without actually being in the market. Thank you, ma'am.
Other comments or questions? Yes, Dan.
Do we need to go ahead and officially move to accept this to the map?
Please do.
If so, I would make a motion that we accept the attached, or the map as presented as an amendment to the farmer's market boundary map.
Second.
Okay, we have Dan's motion and Tim's second. Any further discussion? Yes, Tom.
I just only wanted to make the one more point that it probably would be good for us to make sure that there's handicap accessible parking on the east side of this whole thing, just so that there isn't some unnecessary pressure to have somebody use wheelchair accessible parking on the other side and have an animal that needs to get to the other side and then have an issue. So if we could have it on both sides, then it probably would potentially
Sounds like the
relieve an
committee
issue.
has something to do.
But that has nothing to do with the yes and no right now. It's just that's something that we're going to need to think about
On the commission.
on the commission, and it'll probably come back to us later. But
So that, my question is, are you proposing an amendment to this motion?
no,
or
no, because I
okay, you're
don't, because
proposing
there's no
further
there's-
discussion
No,
at a
because
later
I'm
date.
right.
Okay.
Further discussion because there's no discussion about handicap parking on this particular map.
Okay.
And I just want to point that out.
Okay, and we'll have that noted in our minutes, for sure. Any other discussion? Okay, we'll start the roll call vote with you, Dan.
Aye.
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 Okay, that motion carries as well. Thank you, Kathleen.
Thank you.